After my wife died, the landlord of the house she had been renting called me unexpectedly. "Come here right now," he said. "I've found something you need to see, and whatever you do, don't tell anyone." He sounded nervous, almost afraid. I didn't ask why. I just got in my car and drove straight there, my heart pounding the entire way. When I opened the door, what I saw made me stumble backward. The room spun, and I nearly collapsed where I stood. I'm truly grateful you're still here with me. Before we continue, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it where you are right now? It means more than you know, and I read every single one. Also, please note, this story includes some fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is meaningful and worth hearing. 3 days after we buried Beverly, I sat in our living room, staring at the empty recliner across from mine. 45 years of marriage, and now the silence was so thick I could taste it. The house felt wrong without her, like walking into a room and forgetting why you came, except the forgetting never stopped. I kept replaying the funeral in my mind. The faces, some I recognized, some I didn't. The endless condolences that all sounded the same after a while. The awful finality of watching them lower her casket into the frozen February ground, while a pastor who'd never met Beverly read generic words about eternal rest. But something else kept nagging at me. My daughter Angela and her husband Chad had arrived late. I'd been standing at the graveside with the rest of the family when I heard car doors slam in the parking lot. They hurried across the cemetery, Angela's heels sinking into the soft earth, Chad gripping her elbow like he was holding her upright. They slipped into the back row just as the pastor began. During my eulogy, I'd looked out at the gathered mourners and caught Angela's eye. She'd looked away immediately, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Chad stood rigid beside her, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle working even from 20 feet away. He didn't cry, didn't even seem to be listening, just stared at the casket with an expression I couldn't quite read. At the reception afterward, they'd left within an hour. "Dad needs his rest," Angela had said, though I'd said no such thing. What I needed was my family around me. What I needed was to not feel like I'd been carved hollow and left to echo. But they were gone before I could finish my second cup of coffee, my son-in-law practically dragging Angela out the door. Now it was day 3, and I still hadn't heard from them. No calls, no texts, nothing. The phone rang shrill in the silent house. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear another neighbor tell me how sorry they were, how Beverly was in a better place now. As if anyone knew where the hell that better place was supposed to be. But I picked up anyway. Old habits. "Mr. Sterling." The voice was familiar, but formal. Edward Collins, our landlord who owned the Collins building where we'd run Sterling Antiques for the past decade. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I found something. Something urgent that Beverly left with me before she passed." My pulse kicked up. What kind of something? I can't say over the phone. Edward's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "You need to come to my office, the Collins building above the antique shop. Can you come now?" "Edward, I don't think I'm up for—" "Mr. Sterling, please." There was something in his voice that cut through my fog of grief. Fear, maybe, or urgency. "And sir, don't tell Angela or Chad that you're coming." I sat up straighter. "Why the hell not?" "Because Beverly made me promise. She said—" He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. "She said your life might depend on it." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. 72 years old, and I could still feel adrenaline dump into my system the way it used to in Vietnam when someone yelled, "Incoming." This could be a trap. Some elaborate con targeting a grieving widower. At my age, I wasn't the soldier I'd been 50 years ago. My knees creaked when I stood up, and I got winded climbing stairs. If someone wanted to hurt me, now would be the time. But Edward had said Beverly's name, had said she'd left something with him. And that phrase, "your life might depend on it," those weren't words you used lightly. If there was even a chance this was real, I had to go. I pushed myself out of my chair joints, protesting, and looked around the living room one more time. Beverly's reading glasses still sat on the end table beside her chair. Her book, some mystery novel about a murder on a train, lay open bookmark holding her place. She'd never finish it now, unless, no. I shook my head. She was gone. I'd watched them close the casket, watched them lower it into the ground, thrown a handful of frozen earth onto the polished wood and heard it rattle like bones. But I grabbed my coat anyway. The afternoon air hit me like a slap. When I stepped outside, cold enough to burn my lungs, gray sky, threatening snow. I fumbled with my car keys, hands shaking from something that wasn't entirely the cold. If this was a trap, so be it. I'd been a soldier once. I'd faced down things worse than whatever waited for me at the Collins building. And if it wasn't a trap, if Beverly had really left something for me, some message or explanation, or goodbye, I hadn't gotten at the hospital, then I owed it to her memory to find out what. I slid behind the wheel and started the engine. What I didn't know as I pulled out of the driveway and headed toward downtown was that everything I thought I knew about my wife's death was about to shatter. And the man I'd been 3 days ago, the grieving widower ready to fade quietly into old age, was about to go to war one last time. 20 minutes later, I stood at the foot of a narrow staircase that climbed up the back of the Collins building. The steps looked steeper than I remembered, or maybe I'd just gotten older. My hand found the wooden railing, whether from age or nerves I honestly couldn't tell. Every instinct I'd honed in the jungles of Vietnam 50 years ago was screaming that something was off, or maybe impossibly that something was finally right. I took the first step, then another. My knees protested each one, that familiar grinding ache that came with 7 decades of wear and tear. The stairwell smelled like furniture polish, and old books, a scent that hit me like a physical blow. Beverly's scent. She'd spent 30 years running sterling antiques in this building we'd rented from Edward, and somehow the smell of her work had soaked into these walls and refused to leave, just like her memory refused to leave my mind. The second-floor hallway was dim, lit by a single bulb that cast long shadows. Edward's office door stood slightly ajar at the end. No light came from inside. For half a second, I considered turning around, going home, pretending this phone call had never happened. But I'd driven all the way here, and I'd been a soldier once. We didn't retreat just because we were scared. I pushed the door open. Edward stood by the window, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light, filtering through dusty glass. He turned when I entered, and I caught something in his expression I'd never seen before. Not quite fear, not quite excitement. Something in between that made my pulse jump. "Hey, Mr. Sterling," he said quietly. "Thank you for coming." "All right, Edward." I stepped fully into the office and let the door swing shut behind me. "What's this about? What did Beverly leave?" Movement. Behind Edward in the shadows near the filing cabinets, something shifted. Someone, a woman, stepped into the light. My knees gave out. I grabbed for the doorframe, fingers scrabbling against wood lungs, forgetting how to pull in air. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were telling it, couldn't bridge the gap between what I knew to be true and what I was seeing. Beverly, my wife, alive, standing 3 feet away from me like she'd just stepped out to run an errand and come back with groceries. "Douglas," she whispered. Her voice broke something loose in my chest. Tears, Christ, I hadn't cried at the funeral, hadn't let myself. But now they came hot and fast, blurring my vision. She was crying too, those same tears I'd seen 1,000 times over 45 years. Happy tears, sad tears, angry tears. I knew every variation, and these were all of them at once. I don't remember crossing the room. 1 second I was frozen in the doorway with my heart trying to hammer through my ribs, and the next I had my arms around her, solid, real, warm. I felt her heartbeat against my chest, that steady rhythm I'd fallen asleep listening to for decades. Felt her breath against my neck. Felt her hands grip the back of my shirt, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. She was real. She was alive. How? The word came out strangled. I pulled back just enough to see her face, to touch her cheek, to prove to myself this wasn't some grief-induced hallucination. I watched them lower the casket. I threw dirt on it. The funeral, everyone was there. How? She cupped my face in her hands. Those hands. I'd held them on our wedding day. Held them when Angela was born. When our son Nicholas came 2 years later. Held them in hospital waiting rooms and at kitchen tables and across restaurant booths for 45 years. Hands I thought I'd never feel again. I had to fake it, Douglas. Her voice was steady, now fierce in a way I'd almost forgotten she could be. They were going to kill me, just like they killed Nicholas. The world tilted sideways. What? I couldn't make sense of the words. They were in English. I understood English, but the meaning wouldn't stick. Nicholas, no, the police said. And our son didn't take his own life. Beverly's eyes locked onto mine, and there was something in them that made my blood run cold. Certainty. Absolute, unshakable certainty. Nicholas was murdered, and I have proof. She moved away from me, and that hurt, losing contact, like tearing off a bandage, and walked to Edward's desk. Picked up something I hadn't noticed before. A journal, leather-bound, worn at the edges with writing on the cover in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. Nicholas's handwriting. That careful, precise script he'd learned from me when I taught him to keep a field journal at age 12. Always write clearly, son, I'd told him. Someday your life might depend on someone being able to read what you wrote. Jesus Christ. Had his life depended on it? Chad killed Nicholas, Beverly said, and the words landed like punches. My son-in-law. The man who'd married my daughter 7 years ago. The man who'd stood at Nicholas's funeral and dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. That Chad, no. I shook my head. That's Chad wouldn't. He did. Beverly's voice was iron. And then he tried to kill me. But I figured it out in time. She crossed back to me, holding the journal like it contained something both precious and terrible. Edward stayed by the window, silent, giving us this moment. This is Nicholas's, Beverly said softly. He kept it hidden. Documented everything he found. Everything Chad did. She looked up at me, and I saw 45 years of marriage in her eyes. All the trust, all the love, all the partnership that had carried us through raising kids and burying parents and building a life together. Douglas, I need you to read this. I need you to know the truth about what happened to our son. She placed the journal in my hands. My fingers closed around it, automatically feeling the worn leather, the weight of it. I looked down at Nicholas's handwriting on the cover. His name, his dates, and below that in smaller letters, the truth. I stood there in Edward Collins's dusty office holding my dead son's journal, staring at my supposedly dead wife, and felt the last 3 days hell, the last 2 years crack open like an egg. Everything I'd believed about Nicholas's death, everything I'd grieved over, everything I'd accepted as truth, all of it was a lie. I couldn't take my eyes off Nicholas's handwriting. My son's words written in the weeks before his death, before his murder. The distinction mattered now in a way that made my chest ache. Beverly guided me to a chair. I hadn't realized my legs were shaking until I sat down. Edward moved quietly to the office door and turned the lock. The click echoed in the small space. Read it, Beverly said softly. Then I'll explain everything. My hands trembled as I opened the journal. The pages were filled with Nicholas's careful script, the same methodical documentation I'd taught him when he was 12. A soldier keeps records, I'd told him. Facts matter. Details save lives. He'd remembered. Week 1. Found discrepancies in Sterling manufacturing accounts. $12,000 missing from quarterly reports. Week 3. Traced payments to Chad's personal account. He's been embezzling for at least 2 years. Deposits match up with company losses. Week 6 confirmed total $287,000 stolen. Found betting slips in Chad's desk drawer when I stopped by their house. Heavy losses. He's got a gambling problem, bad one. My vision blurred. I blinked hard and kept reading. Week 8 confronted Chad today at his office. Gave him 48 hours to come clean to Dad and pay it back. He begged for more time. Said he owed money to someone dangerous. Started crying. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The entry was dated 3 days before Nicholas died. The next page was blank. I looked up at Beverly. She was watching me with an expression I'd seen before. The same one she'd worn when we'd gotten the call about Nicholas's death 2 years ago. Except this time she wasn't crying. This time she looked like granite. He gave Chad a chance. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nicholas tried to help him. And Chad killed him for it. Beverly moved to the chair across from me. Edward stayed by the door, silent as a sentinel. Douglas, everything the police said about Nicholas, the gambling, the embezzlement, the pills, it was all Chad. He framed our son to cover his own crimes. How do you know? Even as I asked, I was staring at the journal in my lap. The evidence was right here. But I needed to hear her say it. Needed to understand how this had happened under our noses. Beverly pulled a manila folder from Edward's desk. 6 months ago, I found Nicholas's journal hidden in his old apartment. The landlord was finally clearing out his storage unit. I'd been putting it off going through Nicholas's things, but something made me go that day. She opened the folder and I saw photographs, bank statements, copies of betting slips, all with Chad's name on them. See, I hired a private investigator, Beverly continued. Through Edward, someone discreet who could verify what Nicholas had found. Everything checked out, Edward said quietly. Chad embezzled $287,000 over 27 months. He owed $300,000 to a loan shark named Anthony DeLuca. DeLuca runs operations out of Chicago gambling loans collections. When Nicholas discovered the embezzlement, Chad saw only one way out: Anthony DeLuca. I filed the name away, adding it to the growing list of people who'd touched my son's death. The investigator found the truth about that night, Beverly said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. She'd practiced this speech, I realized. Rehearsed it over and over while I'd been home grieving, not knowing she was alive. Chad visited Nicholas's apartment. Brought an expensive bottle of wine, Nicholas's favorite Cabernet. They talked. Chad convinced Nicholas to have a drink while they worked things out. The wine was drugged, I said. It wasn't a question. Sleeping pills. Enough to kill him. Beverly's hands clenched into fists on her knees. Chad made Nicholas drink it. Then he waited. When Nicholas was unconscious, Chad staged the scene, planted the fake betting receipts, wrote the suicide note on Nicholas's computer, called 911 at 3 a.m. crying, saying he'd stopped by to check on his brother-in-law and found him unresponsive. I felt rage building in my chest, like a living thing, hot and volcanic. The police believed him. Everyone believed him, Edward said. Chad played the devastated family member perfectly, and with the planted evidence pointing to Nicholas as the embezzler and gambler, the police closed the case as suicide. Cut and dried. I believed it too. The words tasted like ash. I thought my son was a thief. I thought he was weak enough to... I couldn't finish the sentence. Beverly's hand found mine across the space between our chairs. Chad counted on that. He destroyed Nicholas's reputation to cover his own sins, and it worked. Until I found the journal. Why didn't you come to me right away? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. 6 months, Beverly. You've known for 6 months. Her expression shifted. Guilt, regret, something that looked like shame. Because I made a mistake. I confronted Chad myself. I thought... She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought I could reason with him, get him to confess, maybe even turn himself in. Jesus Christ, Beverly. I know. She held up a hand. I know how stupid that sounds now. But I wasn't thinking clearly. Our son's murderer was married to our daughter. I thought, if I could just make him see reason, maybe I could spare Angela from what? The truth. My voice rose. Chad killed Nicholas, and you thought you could talk him into admitting it. Oh, I was wrong. Beverly's voice cracked. 2 weeks ago, I overheard him on the phone. He was in the study, didn't know I was in the hallway. He told someone, the old lady knows too much, just like Nicholas. We'll handle it the same way. The room went silent except for my harsh breathing. He tried to kill you, I said. He put something in my afternoon tea. I saw him do it, caught his reflection in the kitchen window. Beverly's voice steadied again. I'd been watching him for days by then, waiting for him to make a move. Edward and I had already put together a plan with Dr. James Peterson. James Peterson. I knew that name. The cardiologist, old friend from medical school, Beverly said. I called him, told him everything. He agreed to help me stage my death. Edward spoke up. The drug Chad used was designed to cause what would look like a natural heart attack. Fast-acting. Hard to detect in a standard toxicology screen. He'd planned it carefully. But I was ready, Beverly said. I switched my teacup with one containing a specialized sedative Dr. Peterson provided. It mimicked death closely enough to fool the paramedics and the initial coroner's examination. James signed the death certificate himself. I stared at my wife, the woman I'd been married to for 45 years, who I thought I'd known inside and out. She'd faked her own death, planned an elaborate deception, and let me grieve for 3 days while she hid in Edward Collins's office. Now, you let me bury an empty casket, I said. I let you stay alive. Her eyes blazed. If Chad knew I'd survived, he would have tried again, and he would have made sure of it the second time. This way he thinks he won. He thinks he's gotten away with murdering both our son and his mother-in-law. I stood up abruptly. The chair scraped backward with a harsh screech. I'm going to kill him. No. Beverly was on her feet too, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. That's exactly what he wants. You attack him, he claims self-defense, plays the victim again. We need to be smarter than that. Smarter. I could barely control my voice. He murdered our son. He tried to murder you. How much smarter do we need to be? She's smart enough to make him confess, Beverly said. On record, with evidence that will hold up in court and clear Nicholas's name once and for all. She walked to Edward's desk and picked up a small digital recorder. No bigger than a deck of cards. Edward produced a tiny microphone from a drawer. Beverly slid both devices across the desk toward me. Are you ready to go to war, Douglas? I looked at the equipment. Looked at my wife, my living, breathing, fierce wife who'd outsmarted a killer and come back from the dead to get justice for our son. I felt something click into place inside me. Something I hadn't felt since Vietnam. Since the last time someone had asked me if I was ready to fight. Tell me the plan. We spent the next 3 hours turning Edward's cramped office into a war room. The sun had set outside, throwing long shadows across the desk, where we'd spread Nicholas's journal, legal documents, and surveillance equipment. I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, not since my last tour in Vietnam. Purpose. Clear, focused purpose. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, standing at Edward's desk, like I was back in a command tent planning reconnaissance missions. The old instincts hadn't left. They'd just been waiting. Dormant. But we need three things: opportunity, evidence, and an exit strategy. Beverly watched me from her chair, and I caught that expression I remembered from our early years together. Pride mixed with concern, the same look she'd given me when I'd re-enlisted for my second tour, knowing she couldn't stop me but wishing she could. The opportunity. I continued pulling out a legal pad Edward had provided. Is attorney Jeffrey Matthews. Edward, you know him right. Handled the Sterling Antiques lease paperwork. Good man, Edward confirmed. Discreet, trustworthy. Perfect. You'll arrange for him to visit my house tomorrow afternoon. He'll present a fake will, Beverly's supposed final wishes. I sketched out the basic framework. Down inside a trust fund worth $2.5 million in my name. But here's the hook: it comes with a competency requirement. Competency requirement? Edward leaned forward. If I'm found mentally incompetent within 6 months by a licensed medical professional, the trust freezes for 10 years. But if I maintain competency, I have full control of the funds. I looked at Beverly. Chad will see dollar signs. Big ones. He'll need me functional enough to sign papers and make decisions, but vulnerable enough to manipulate. Beverly's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. He'll have to keep you alive and seemingly healthy. It buys us time. Exactly. I moved to the second point on my mental checklist. While he's playing the devoted son-in-law, I'll be gathering evidence. These recording devices. I picked up the equipment Beverly had produced. I'll plant them myself throughout the house. Bedroom, living room, kitchen. Old spy tradecraft from the service. Hide them in vents under furniture, places Chad won't think to look. That's the evidence component, Edward said. What about the exit strategy? A code word. I pulled out my own phone, an old flip model I'd refused to upgrade. If things go sideways, if I'm in real danger, I'll text you a specific phrase: Beverly's roses need watering. That's your signal to call Detective Richard Anderson immediately. Anderson, Beverly frowned. The one who investigated Nicholas's death. The same. He's the only cop who seemed skeptical about the suicide ruling. Called me twice after the case closed, asking if I was sure Nicholas had been acting depressed. I remembered those conversations now with new understanding. Anderson's instincts had been right. I think he suspected something was off but couldn't prove it. He'll listen to us when the time comes. Edward made a note. I'll keep my phone on 24 hours. Anderson's direct line. I'll get it to you. I turned to Beverly. Which brings me to the hardest part of this plan. You have to stay hidden. Here with Edward. No contact with anyone outside this room. Douglas, if Chad knows you're alive, we lose everything. I kept my voice firm. He'll run. Or worse, he'll come after both of us with nothing to lose. Right now, he thinks he's won. He thinks he's safe. That's our advantage. Beverly stood and crossed to me. You're asking me to let you walk into danger while I hide like a coward. I'm asking you to trust me. I took her hands. I was a soldier once. This is what I'm trained for. Infiltration, intelligence gathering, knowing when to strike. I squeezed her fingers. Can you trust me to do this? She searched my eyes for a long moment. After 45 years of marriage, she could read me like a book, every tell, every bluff, every truth. You're not just doing this for justice, she said quietly. You're doing this for revenge. I didn't deny it. I'm doing this for Nicholas, for you, for every day I believed our son was something he wasn't. My voice roughened. But yes, I want Chad to know he failed. I want him to see me standing when he expected me broken. Beverly pulled me into an embrace. her head tucked perfectly under my chin the way it had for decades. "Be careful. I just got you back. I can't lose you for real." "You won't," I promised, though we both knew I couldn't guarantee that. Edward cleared his throat diplomatically. "One more thing, Mr. Sterling. This Nokia phone." He produced a basic model from his desk drawer. "It's prepaid, untraceable. Beverly and I are the only ones with the number. Text us updates. Never call unless it's a genuine emergency. If Chad searches your regular phone, he won't find anything suspicious." I took the Nokia and felt its weight in my palm. Cold. Solid. Like carrying a sidearm again. "What's your cover story?" Beverly asked. "How will you act, a grief-stricken widower barely functional?" I let my shoulders slump, my face go slack. The transformation took seconds. I'd learned it in POW training. How to look beaten when you weren't. How to seem weak when you were gathering strength. "I'll shuffle when I walk. Forget things. Seem lost without you." I straightened back up. "They'll think I'm an easy target. They have no idea they're the ones being hunted." Beverly touched my face. "Tomorrow morning you walk back into that house and become someone you're not." "No." I caught her hand, pressed it against my cheek. "Tomorrow I become exactly who I've always been. A soldier, a father, a husband who won't let his family's killer walk free." We sealed the plan with a long kiss. Might be our last. I refused to think that way, but the possibility hung between us like smoke. Beverly held my face in her hands one more time. "I've trusted you for 45 years, Douglas Sterling. I'm not stopping now." I left Edward's office as the clock struck 9. The streets were empty, cold February air biting through my coat. Tomorrow morning, I'd drive back to that house, the one I'd shared with Beverly for 30 years. The one where Chad and Angela were probably already making themselves comfortable, thinking they were safe. Tomorrow, I'd walk through that door and perform the role of my life. The broken old man, the grieving widower, the easy mark. They thought they'd won. They thought I was just a 72-year-old man with creaking knees and fading memories. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I drove home slowly, rehearsing every detail. Each turn of the steering wheel felt like I was navigating toward my own funeral. The Douglas Sterling. They knew the one who'd buried his wife 3 days ago. The one who shuffled through life in a fog of grief was about to take center stage, or at least that's what they needed to believe. Angela's car sat in my driveway when I pulled in. I frowned genuinely this time, not part of the act. I hadn't invited her to stay over. I parked and made myself shuffle toward the front door, letting my shoulders sag my gait, uncertain. An old man broken by loss. The door swung open before I could touch the handle. Dad. Angela rushed out, throwing her arms around me. Her perfume hit me like a wall, too sweet, too strong, like she'd bathed in it. "We were so worried. Where did you go?" Over her shoulder, I spotted Chad standing in my living room, in my house. His smile was perfectly calibrated, concerned son-in-law, worried family member. But his eyes didn't match. They were calculating, measuring, just driving around. I mumbled, letting confusion cloud my voice. Needed to clear my head. "You shouldn't be alone right now, Dad." Chad stepped forward, smooth as oil. "Angela and I talked about it. We're going to stay here for a while. Help you adjust to everything." I blinked slowly, as if processing this information took real effort. Inside, every alarm bell I'd developed in Vietnam was screaming. They'd moved in. Already. This was happening faster than I'd anticipated. That's kind of you," I managed. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Attorney Jeffrey Matthews stood on my porch, briefcase in hand, his expression appropriately somber. "Mr. Sterling, my condolences again. May I come in? I need to discuss Beverly's will with you." I led everyone to the dining room. Matthews was flawless, professional, respectful, giving nothing away. He opened his briefcase with the practiced ease of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Beverly made arrangements before her passing. Matthews said, pulling out documents. Mr. Sterling, she's left you her entire estate consolidated into a trust fund worth $2.5 million. I kept my eyes on the papers, but my attention was on Chad. In my peripheral vision, I saw his eyes widen just a fraction barely noticeable. A flash of something crossed his face before he masked it with concern. But I'd caught it. Greed raw and hungry. However, Matthews continued, and I saw Chad lean forward almost imperceptibly. There is a competency requirement. Beverly wanted to ensure the funds were managed properly. If within 6 months you're deemed mentally incompetent by a licensed medical professional, the trust freezes for 10 years. But if you maintain competency, you have full control. Competent. I repeated, letting the word sit awkwardly on my tongue. Yes, I understand. Chad spoke up, trying to sound casual. What exactly constitutes competency? Ability to manage daily affairs, make informed decisions, comprehend financial matters. Matthews rattled off the requirements like he was reading from a textbook. Standard evaluation procedures. Beverly wanted to protect Douglas from potential exploitation. A muscle twitched in Chad's jaw. Just once. So fast most people would have missed it. Had Beverly suspected him even then? Or was Matthews improvising brilliantly, adding that last word like a knife slipped between ribs? Matthews gathered his papers after another 20 minutes of legal details. I'll check in with you next week, Mr. Sterling. Take care of yourself. After he left, I watched Chad's mask slip for maybe half a second. His eyes tracked the departing attorney's car through the window, and I saw it the predator beneath the concerned family man. He was calculating odds, measuring my weakness, planning his approach. $2.5 million. One old man, 6 months. He thought he'd found an opportunity. He had no idea he was walking into a trap I'd spent 3 hours setting last night. Dad, you should rest. Angela said, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt, fear, both. Yes, I agreed, letting my voice waver. I am tired. I retreated to my bedroom, leaving them downstairs. Through the heating vent, I could hear their voices, muffled but present. Good. If I could hear them, the recording devices I'd plant tomorrow would pick them up perfectly. That night, I lay in bed, listening to whispered conversation bleeding through the wall from the guest room. I pressed my ear to the plaster, careful to keep my breathing quiet. 3 days. Chad's voice low and urgent. That's all we have to get him to sign a power of attorney. After that, things get complicated with DeLuca. Angela murmured something I couldn't make out. I don't care. Chad's voice rose, then dropped again. We're too close to fail now. Do you understand? We're too damn close. I pulled back from the wall and reached under my pillow for the Nokia. Texted Edward. They're here. 3-day countdown. Performance successful. His response came within seconds. Stay safe. Be worried but trusts you. I typed back, tell her I love her and I'm winning. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. 3 days until Chad made his move. 3 days to survive and gather evidence. The recording devices were still in my car trunk. I'd plant them tomorrow morning when they thought I was just wandering around, confused. The trap was set. The bait was in place. Now I just had to stay alive long enough to spring it. Through the wall, I heard Chad's footsteps pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. A caged animal running out of time. Good. Let him feel the pressure. Let him make mistakes. Because every mistake he made brought me one step closer to justice for Nicholas. One step closer to putting Beverly's would-be killer behind bars where he belonged. I woke the next morning to find my bedroom door locked from the outside. At first, I thought I was mistaken. I tried the handle once, twice. The lock clicked uselessly, the sound echoing in the quiet house. Day 1 as a prisoner in my own home. Today, Chad's voice came through the door, smooth and concerned. Sorry about this. It's for your safety. You were wandering last night. We heard you trying to leave. Can't have you getting hurt or lost. I hadn't wandered anywhere. I'd been in bed all night listening to their whispered arguments through the wall. But I said nothing, just pressed my palm against the door, feeling the solid wood between us. They brought breakfast an hour later, stale bread and room-temperature water. Not enough to sustain a man my size, but enough to avoid the appearance of outright starvation. I recognized the tactic immediately. Deprivation, isolation, weakening the target. They'd underestimated one thing. I'd survived POW training in the military. I knew how to endure. I spent day 1 surveying the room the way I'd surveyed prison cells in training exercises back in '68. The floorboard near the radiator was loose. I discovered it when I stepped on it and heard the telltale creak. I pried it up carefully and found a hollow space beneath maybe 6 inches deep, perfect for hiding the recording device I'd smuggled in my jacket pocket yesterday. The window opened, though it was a 15-foot drop to the garden below. I tested the latch. Functional. An escape route if things went completely sideways. The radiator pipe could be detached with enough force. Heavy iron would make a decent weapon if I needed one. I wasn't helpless. I was preparing a battlefield. Angela brought lunch, more stale bread, more water. Her hands trembled as she set the tray on my nightstand. She wouldn't meet my eyes, wouldn't look at anything except the floor. Angela, I said softly, letting my voice sound weak and confused. She flinched like I'd shouted. I'm sorry, Dad. Chad says it's just until you're feeling better. Better. I let the word hang in the air between us. She fled without answering. After she left, I activated the recording device and slipped it under the loose floorboard. Any conversation outside my door would now be captured. Every word, every threat, every confession. Day 2 brought the same routine, minimal food-water isolation. But I used the Nokia to text Edward, locked in bedroom, proceeding as planned. Don't worry, Beverly. His response came quickly. She's terrified for you. Stay strong. I texted back, tell her I love her, and I'm winning. The truth was more complicated. My body was starting to feel the deprivation joints aching more than usual, a hollow feeling in my stomach. But I'd been hungry before. Uncomfortable before. This was nothing compared to 3 days pinned down outside Da Nang, with no rations and no water except what we could filter from a muddy stream. That night, around 11 o'clock, I heard footsteps stop outside my door. Heavy. Uneven. Chad had been drinking. I could smell the whiskey seeping through the gap under the door. You know what your problem is. His voice was slurred, angry. He was talking to himself, or maybe to me. Hard to tell. You all think you're so much better. Nicholas with his righteousness. Beverly with her suspicions. You with your goddamn war hero act. I stayed silent, barely breathing. The recording device was catching every word. Not they don't understand. Chad's voice rose, then dropped again like he'd remembered where he was. Anthony DeLuca doesn't forgive debts. He destroys people. I did what I had to do. Nicholas was going to ruin everything. Always in my way. Both of you, always in my way. There it was. Partial confirmation. Not enough for a murder conviction, not yet. But enough to know Beverly had been right about everything. Enough to know my son had died because he'd stood between Chad and his escape route. Dr. Angela's voice, distant and worried. Come to bed. The footsteps retreated. I exhaled slowly, my heart hammering. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Then I carefully retrieved the recording device from under the floorboard and checked it. Chad's drunken rant was crystal clear. I texted Edward, partial confession recorded. He's starting to crack. But I knew I needed more. I needed him to say explicitly what he'd done to Nicholas. Needed him to admit the sleeping pills, the staged suicide, the deliberate destruction of my son's reputation. And tomorrow was day 3. Chad's deadline with Anthony DeLuca. Whatever he'd planned, whatever desperate move he was going to make, it was coming. I lay back down, keeping the detached radiator pipe within reach. If he came through that door, intending violence, I'd be ready. Through the wall, I heard him pacing in the guest room. Back and forth, a trapped animal running out of time. Good. Let the pressure build. Let him feel cornered, because cornered animals made mistakes, and I was counting on it. Morning light filtered through my bedroom window on the 3rd day. I heard the lock click open. Angela entered, carrying my breakfast tray, still the same stale bread and lukewarm water. This time, she didn't immediately leave. She stood there, the tray trembling in her hands, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "Angela," I kept my voice gentle and non-threatening. The tray clattered onto the nightstand. She collapsed onto the edge of my bed, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for a long time. I waited, letting her cry. Sometimes silence was the best interrogation technique I'd ever learned. "I'm so sorry, Daddy," she finally whispered. The word hit me harder than I expected. She hadn't called me that since she was 12. For what, sweetheart? For all of it. She lifted red-rimmed eyes. "I think Chad did something to Nicholas. I think he's lying about what happened." My pulse quickened, but I kept my face calm. "What makes you say that the week before Nicholas died, he came to our apartment, late after midnight?" Her voice cracked. "He said he needed to warn me about Chad, that Chad was in serious trouble, that I should be careful. I thought they'd just argued at work. Brothers-in-law stuff. What did Nicholas say exactly?" "He said Chad had made dangerous choices, that people were going to get hurt." She wiped her eyes. "He looked scared, Dad." Nicholas never looked scared, but that night he was terrified. He hugged me and said, "If anything happens to me, remember I tried to do the right thing." Her voice broke. The next day, Nicholas was dead. Everyone said he'd been gambling, stealing, that he'd taken those pills himself. She looked at me desperately. But Nicholas wasn't like that. "You knew him." "I know," I said quietly. "After the funeral, I found something." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. A text on Chad's phone. He left it on the counter and it lit up. She showed me the screen. The message was old, from a contact saved as AC problem solved. "Brother-in-law won't talk now. Make sure old man believes the story." Cold rage spread through me. "Did you confront Chad?" I tried. Her voice dropped. He grabbed me, slammed me into the wall, told me if I ever mentioned it to anyone, he'd say I helped him, that I knew about the money, that I planned it. She pulled up her sleeve. Faded bruises marked her skin. He said they'd arrest me too. I'd lose everything, my job, my freedom, you and Mom. She shook. "I'm terrified. He's getting worse. The drinking, the anger, and now with you locked in here and Mom gone." I saw it clearly. The fear, the control. Angela wasn't evil, she was trapped. Chad had been abusing her for years, and I'd been too blind to see it, too buried in my own grief to notice. "I was weak," she said. "I should have come to you. Should have gone to the police. But what if I was wrong? What if I destroyed my marriage for nothing? But you knew," I said gently. "I knew." She nodded. "And I did nothing. I let Nicholas's name be destroyed. And now Chad has you locked up, and I know what he's planning. I know he's going to." She stopped, hand to her mouth. "What's he planning, Angela?" "I don't know exactly. I heard him on the phone with someone, DeLuca. Chad owes him a lot of money. DeLuca wants it today." She grabbed my hand. Whatever Chad does to get that money, it involves you. And I don't think he plans to let you survive it. This was the moment. Push too hard and lose her, or plant a seed and let it grow. Angela listened carefully. It's not too late to make this right. How she laughed bitterly. He'll destroy me. Nicholas. Mom. You're next. And if I stop him, I'm next after you. Not if we stop him first. Together, she stared at me, hope and terror warring. You believe me, I do. Angela Chad shouted from downstairs. She jumped, wiped her tears, and backed away. If he suspects Angela, I caught her hand. When you're ready to be free, I'll help you. But you have to choose. She squeezed my hand once, then fled. The lock clicked shut. Alone, I processed what I'd learned. Angela had known for 2 years. She'd seen proof. Nicholas had warned her. Fear had kept her silent. Could I save her? Could she be redeemed? I pulled out the Nokia and texted Beverly, Angela is breaking. She knows about Nicholas. She's scared, but might help. Don't give up. Beverly replied, our daughter, yes, I typed. Our daughter is still in there under the fear and abuse. I didn't know if I was right, but I had to believe it. Because if Angela turned on Chad when the moment came, we'd have everything we needed. And the moment I sensed was very close. I thought about the years I'd mistaken her silence for indifference, her distance for cruelty. I remembered missed calls, clipped answers, holidays she left early. Each memory rearranged itself into a pattern of survival I hadn't recognized. Chad had isolated her, rewritten the story, and taught her to doubt her own instincts. That was his power. But fear cracks when truth is named, and today she had named it. If she could hold on to that truth even for a few hours, it might be enough. Enough to buy time. Enough to give her courage. Enough to turn a victim into a witness when it mattered most. And enough to save us all. That afternoon, I heard Chad's phone ring somewhere outside my locked door. His footsteps moved toward the hallway, away from where Angela might overhear. But sound traveled through these old walls. I pressed my ear to the crack and listened. Tony, please. Chad's voice was high, panicked. Nothing like his usual controlled tone. A pause. Then, I understand. 72 hours. Yes, another pause. I could almost hear the threat on the other end of the line. 300,000, I know I'm getting it. The old man has the money, he just needs to... Chad's voice cracked. Tony, please, just 2 more days. 2 days and I'll have everything. The voice on the other end must have been loud, because I caught fragments bleeding through. Don't care. Dead mother-in-law. My money. Start with your knees. 2 days, I swear. Chad was begging now, all pretense of dignity gone. Please don't. The line went dead. I heard Chad punch the wall hard enough that I felt the vibration through the doorframe. God damn it. Angela's footsteps approached. What happened? Anthony DeLuca happened. He wants his money now. But the lawyer said Dad's trust has requirements. I don't care what Matthews said. Chad's voice turned vicious. Do you want me dead? Is that what you want? Because that's what's going to happen if your father doesn't sign those power of attorney papers today. Chad, please. No, we're out of time. That old man will sign one way or another. Their footsteps moved away. I pulled back from the door and grabbed the Nokia. Texted Edward. DeLuca gave ultimatum. Chad has 72 hours. He's desperate. Things moving fast, be ready. Edward's response. Detective Anderson on standby. Beverly says hold firm. We need full confession on recording. I typed back. Tell her I know. But Chad's cornered now. Cornered animals are the most dangerous kind. Easy for Beverly to say, "Hold firm," from Edward's safe office. She wasn't the one locked in a room with a desperate man who'd already killed once. But I'd faced worse odds in Vietnam. I could handle this. The lock clicked. I barely had time to hide the phone before Chad burst through the door. He held papers in his hand, official-looking documents with multiple signature lines. "Sign these." He thrust them at me. I blinked slowly, playing confused. "What are these power of attorney papers?" "They let me help manage your finances while you're grieving. Standard procedure." I looked at the documents like I could barely understand the words. "I don't know." Chad's hand shot out and grabbed my collar, yanking me forward with surprising strength. His breath stank of whiskey, not just a drink or two, but the kind of drinking that came from desperation. "Sign the papers." "I need to read them first." "You need to sign them." His voice was nearly a scream. Then he caught himself, released me, smoothed down my shirt, forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Dad, please, this is for your own good. Beverly would want you taken care of." I saw his other hand move toward his jacket pocket, just for a moment. But it was enough. The outline of something hard and angular pressed against the fabric. A gun. He'd brought a gun into my bedroom. My military training kicked into high gear. I cataloged everything: his position relative to the door, the distance to the radiator pipe under my pillow, whether I could reach it before he could draw the weapon. The odds weren't good. Not at 72, with creaky knees against a younger man, already holding the advantage. I'll think about it overnight." I managed, letting my voice shake, though not entirely from acting this time. Chad's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "You'll sign tomorrow. First thing. Or we're going to have a very different conversation." His hand touched his jacket again. A reminder. A threat. "Do you understand me, Douglas?" The use of my first name, not Dad, not even Mr. Sterling, told me everything I needed to know. The mask was off. The pretense was gone. This was the real Chad, the one who'd killed my son and tried to kill my wife. I nodded slowly. He left, locking the door behind him. I heard him bark orders at Angela downstairs. "Tomorrow morning, make sure he's ready." I picked up the Nokia with trembling hands this time, not from acting. Texted Edward. Chad, armed, threatened me. Tomorrow morning is his breaking point. If I don't sign, I think he'll use violence. Beverly's response came through Edward immediately. "Get out. Leave now," through the window. I looked at the window, then at the recording device hidden under the floorboard. I was so close. Chad was unraveling. One more push, and he'd confess everything, not just the partial drunken rambling from before, but a full admission of what he'd done to Nicholas. I texted back, "Not yet. I need his full confession. I need justice for Nicholas." "Douglas, no." I turned off the phone. Tomorrow morning, this would end, one way or another. Chad would either confess to Nicholas's murder on tape or, well, I had the radiator pipe. And 50 years ago in Vietnam, I'd learned that sometimes survival came down to who was willing to do what needed to be done. I positioned the pipe within easy reach and settled in to wait for dawn. Through the wall, I heard Chad pacing again. Faster now, more frantic. The 72-hour clock was ticking in his head, and I could hear it driving him toward the edge. Good. Let him pace. Let him panic. Because when morning came, one of us was going to break, and it wasn't going to be me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, back against the headboard, watching the door. The radiator pipe lay across my lap, cold iron, heavy enough to crack a skull if it came to that. Every sound made my heart jump. A floorboard creaking, the furnace kicking on, the wind rattling the windows. At 72, I wasn't sure I could defend myself against a younger man with a gun. But I'd die trying. Dawn came slowly, gray light, bleeding through the window. I heard movement downstairs, muffled voices, the clatter of dishes. Then footsteps on the stairs. The lock clicked open. Angela entered carrying a breakfast tray. Odd, since it was barely 8 in the morning. Usually they didn't bring food until 9 or 10, part of their deprivation strategy. Special breakfast, she said, not meeting my eyes. Chad insisted. I looked at the tray: scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. But something was off. The eggs had a strange sheen on their surface, like oil floating on water. The toast was darker on one side than the other, as if it had been burned and then scraped. The orange juice looked cloudier than it should be, with a faint sediment at the bottom of the glass. My military training kicked in. Always inspect your food in hostile territory. That's kind of you, I said slowly. But my stomach's been upset. All this stress. You need to eat, Dad. Keep your strength up. Her voice sounded rehearsed, like she was reciting lines someone else had written. Chad said you need to eat a good meal before we discuss the papers. Before I sign my life away, she meant. Or before whatever else Chad had planned. Maybe just the toast. I picked up a slice, pretended to take a bite, but pressed it against my cheek instead, letting my jaw hide the motion. When Angela turned slightly to set down the water glass, I slipped the toast into my pajama pocket. The eggs are still warm, she urged, and I heard something in her voice. Desperation. Fear, guilt. I noticed her hands were shaking worse than yesterday. Her eyes kept darting to the door like she expected Chad to burst in any second. I really can't. I clutched my stomach. I think I might be sick. But I made a retching sound, loud enough to be convincing. Angela jumped back, her face going pale. Let me get you water. She practically ran from the room. I heard Chad's angry voice from downstairs. Did he eat it? He's sick, he couldn't. Useless. I moved fast, grabbed a small piece of the scrambled eggs and went to the window. There was a potted plant on the windowsill outside one of Beverly's herbs that had somehow survived her death. Basil, I thought, though. I'd never paid much attention to her gardening. I pushed the window open and crumbled the egg into the soil, mixing it in slightly, so it wasn't obvious. If I was right about what was in that food, the plant would show signs. Fast. I wrapped the toast in tissue from the nightstand and hid it under my mattress. Evidence if I survived long enough to use it. The rest of the day passed in tense silence. They brought lunch. I claimed my stomach was worse. Dinner, I said I couldn't keep anything down. Each time I watched Chad's frustration grow, his jaw would clench. His hands would flex into fists. But he couldn't force-feed me without raising questions later. As darkness fell, I used the Nokia's flashlight to check the plant outside my window. The leaves had turned brown at the edges. Wilted. Dying. I photographed it quickly, my hands shaking now too. Whatever had been in that breakfast, it was lethal. They'd tried to stage another natural death. Old man's heart gives out from grief and stress. No one questions it. Chad gets the money and walks away clean. Just like they'd tried with Beverly. Just like they'd succeeded with Nicholas. I texted Edward the photos. Attempted poisoning via meal. Evidence photographed. Plant dead within 12 hours. His response came within seconds. Beverly says tomorrow is the day. Final push. Stay alive until morning. Beverly's next message. I love you. Please be careful. After tomorrow, this ends. I typed back, I love you too. Tell Detective Anderson to be ready. And tell him to bring backup. I lay in bed that night not sleeping, just resting with my eyes closed, and my hand on the radiator pipe listening to Chad and Angela argue downstairs. His voice kept getting louder, more frantic. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught fragments. Out of time. A DeLuca's deadline. One way or another, the DeLuca deadline was tomorrow. The power of attorney hadn't been signed. The poisoned meal had failed. Chad was out of options, out of time, out of patience, which made him more dangerous than ever. I gripped the radiator pipe tighter and positioned myself against the wall where the door would hide me when it opened. If he came for me tonight, if he decided violence was his only remaining option, I'd be ready. But I also knew tomorrow everything would change. One way or another, this war would end. I just hoped I'd live to see Beverly's face again, to hold her, to tell her we'd won. Through the wall, I heard a crash, glass breaking maybe. Chad shouting, Angela crying. The pressure was breaking him. Good. Let him crack. Let him make mistakes. Because tomorrow morning, when he made his final move, I'd be ready. The recording device was in place. Detective Anderson was on standby. Beverly was waiting. And this time, Chad Pierce wasn't going to walk away. This time, justice would have its day. The door opened at dawn. I hadn't slept. I'd been waiting alert with the radiator pipe in my hand. But instead of violence, Chad entered with red-rimmed eyes and tear-stained cheeks. He looked broken, defeated. That's when he looked most dangerous. I'm Dad, he said, his voice cracking. I need to tell you the truth. I sat up slowly, keeping the pipe hidden beneath my pillow. What truth? He sank onto the edge of my bedhead in his hands. The picture of a man at the end of his rope. I've done terrible things. I'm so sorry. The performance was almost convincing. I stayed silent, waiting. When I embezzled money from Sterling Manufacturing. $287,000 over 2 years. He looked up at me with desperate eyes. I have a gambling problem. Got in over my head with a loan shark. I know it's wrong. I know I've disappointed you. When Nicholas found out, I said carefully, yes. Chad's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We argued about it. He was so angry, Dad. Said he'd turn me in, destroy my life, take Angela away from me. And then, that night, Chad wiped his eyes and I had to admit the tears looked real. Fear could do that, make a man cry genuine tears even while he lied. He was so distraught about the embezzlement, about having to choose between me and his family integrity. He took pills, made it look like he'd been the one stealing, like the shame was too much. I felt rage building in my chest like magma, but I kept my face neutral, concerned. You're saying Nicholas took his own life? I tried to stop him. Chad grabbed my hand, and I had to force myself not to pull away. I begged him not to, but he'd already swallowed them. By the time I realized what he'd done, it was too late. I should have called for help, I know that now. Instead, I panicked. I let everyone believe he was the embezzler because I was too cowardly to admit my own mistakes. Every word was a carefully constructed lie. Blaming Nicholas for his own murder. Making my son the villain in a story where Chad was the monster. Why are you telling me this now? Because if you don't help me, Anthony DeLuca's people will kill me today. The mask cracked. Real terror flooded his face, not remorse, but fear for his own life. I owe him $300,000. He gave me until noon. If I don't have the money, I'm dead. And you want me to sign over Beverly's trust? Just temporarily, I'll pay you back every cent. I promise, Dad. I'll go to therapy, I'll fix myself, I'll make everything right. He was crying now, real tears of genuine terror, not for what he'd done, but for what would happen to him. Please, think of Angela. She'll be alone if they take me. I pretended to consider this. Let the silence stretch out between us like a wire pulled taut. I need time to think about this. We don't have time. His voice spiked sharply. Then he caught himself, forced it back down. Please, Dad, I'm begging you. Tomorrow, I said. I'll give you my answer tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. He stood abruptly, and for a second the mask dropped completely. I saw calculation flash across his face. Tomorrow I'll be... He stopped himself. But I'd seen it. Seen the math he was doing. If he'd be dead tomorrow, then I would have to give my answer today. One way or another. The threat hung in the air between us like smoke. Chad left without another word. I heard him pacing downstairs, Heard Angela's worried voice asking questions he didn't answer. That night around midnight, I heard heavy footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate. The doorknob rattled softly, someone testing whether it was still locked. I gripped the radiator pipe tighter, positioning myself in the dark corner, where I'd have the advantage if he entered. The footsteps retreated. I texted Edward one final message. Tomorrow morning. He's going to make his move. Be ready. His response came immediately. Anderson and team are 2 minutes away. Beverly is with us. Code word and we come in. I set the phone down and waited for dawn. Chad had said tomorrow I'd give my answer. He was right. But my answer wouldn't be what he expected. Tomorrow he'd give his answer too. About what he did to Nicholas. About what he tried to do to Beverly and me. And this time his answer would be recorded, witnessed, and permanent. I knew Chad would come the next morning. I knew he'd bring a gun, and I knew one of us wouldn't survive. Here's my question for you. Could you face down a killer to capture his confession, knowing your life is on the line? Share your answer below. Now, let me tell you about the final confrontation. Critical note: what you're about to hear includes fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that doesn't work for you, this is the perfect time to stop. I completely respect your choice. I woke to the sound of metal sliding on metal, a weapon being loaded. My eyes snapped open. Pale dawn light filtered through the window. Chad's silhouette filled the doorway, and in his hand, the outline of a gun was unmistakable. This was it. Everything had been building to this moment. "Get up," Chad said. His voice was flat, emotionless. The desperation from yesterday had burned away, leaving something colder behind. More dangerous. I rose slowly, keeping my hands visible. The radiator pipe was under my pillow, too far away now to do me any good. "Chad, what are you—" "Living room, now." He gestured with the weapon. "We're going to have that different conversation I mentioned." I walked ahead of him, my military training cataloging everything: his position behind me, the distance to the front door, whether Angela was in the house. The recording device in my bedroom wouldn't help me here, but the Nokia in my pocket might. He forced me into a dining room chair. Angela stood in the corner, her face pale as milk arms wrapped around herself. She wouldn't look at me. "Sign." Chad dropped the power of attorney papers on the table in front of me, shoved a pen into my hand. "Chad, please." Angela's voice was barely a whisper. "Shut up." He didn't even glance at her. "Your father is going to sign these papers right now, or I'll make sure he never signs anything again." My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. "Before I sign, I need to know something. You need—" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't need anything, old man. Tell me the truth about Nicholas." The room went dead silent. Chad's expression flickered surprise, then calculation. "I already told you. He took his own life because—" "No." I interrupted, meeting his eyes. "He didn't. Nicholas didn't steal from Sterling Manufacturing. He didn't gamble. He didn't do any of the things you claimed. How he found your books." I continued, watching his face carefully. "He discovered you'd embezzled $287,000. He confronted you, gave you a chance to confess." I leaned forward. "And you killed him for it." Angela gasped. Chad's hand tightened on the gun. "That's insane," he said, but his voice had changed. Tell me what really happened that night, Chad. Tell me the truth about my son. Maybe it was the alcohol still in his system from last night. Maybe it was the pressure of DeLuca's deadline ticking in his head. Maybe it was that he thought he held all the power with that gun in his hand. Whatever the reason, Chad's control snapped. "Fine," he shouted. "You want the truth? Nicholas was a self-righteous fool. He found my accounts, marched into my office like some kind of hero, threatened to destroy my life. So you killed him, I said quietly. I handled it. Chad's face was red now, veins standing out in his neck. He said he'd turn me in to you, to the police, said I'd go to prison, said Angela would leave me. He was going to ruin everything. Angela was sobbing in the corner. Chad ignored her completely. Nicholas wouldn't listen to reason. He continued, the words pouring out like poison from a wound. So I invited him over, told him we'd work it out together. Brought out wine, expensive bottle, his favorite Cabernet. He didn't even notice when I added enough sleeping pills to put him down permanently. My hands clenched the table edge. You watched him die. So I watched him sleep. Then I made it look like shame, like he was the thief, the gambler, the one who couldn't live with what he'd done. I planted the evidence, wrote the note on his computer, called 911 crying. He smiled bitterly. The police bought every word. You bought every word. And Beverly, oh no. His smile widened, and I saw the monster clearly now. Your wife, she got too smart for her own good. Found Nicholas's journal, started asking questions. So I put something in her afternoon tea one day. He shrugged like he was discussing the weather. Watched her collapse right there in your kitchen. Heart attack, the doctor said. So sad. So tragic. Angela screamed, no, oh God, no. She's gone. Chad continued, his voice almost casual now. Nicholas is gone. And if you don't sign those papers right now, you'll... The front door exploded inward with a deafening crash. Wood splintered. Flashlights cut through the dim room like searchlights cutting through fog. Police dropped the weapon. Chad froze, the gun still pointed at me, his face shocked white. Detective Anderson led the charge, 3 officers behind him with weapons drawn and ready. Drop it now. In my pocket, the Nokia had recorded everything. The code word hadn't even been necessary. I'd activated the audio recording function before leaving my bedroom just in case. Every word of Chad's confession had been captured. Every single word. Chad stood frozen. The gun still pointed vaguely in my direction. His face had gone from red with rage to white with shock in the space of a heartbeat. He seemed unable to process what was happening. Chad Pierce, drop the weapon or we will fire. The gun clattered to the floor. Chad's hands went up slowly, mechanically, like a puppet with cut strings. Officers swarmed him. One kicked the weapon away, while another yanked his arms behind his back. No, Chad whispered. No, this isn't. How did you... Then I saw movement in the shattered doorway. Beverly stepped through the splintered wood frame. She was calm, composed, powerful in a way I'd forgotten during our quiet retirement years. This was the Beverly who'd run Sterling Antiques for 3 decades, who'd raised 2 children, buried her parents, and survived my PTSD nightmares after Vietnam. Strong, unbreakable. Hello, Chad, she said quietly. Chad's face drained of what little color remained. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He tried to take a step backward and stumbled into the officers holding him. Nokon, he finally managed. You're supposed to be Ned. Beverly's voice was ice. You tried. I'll give you credit for that. But I've always been smarter than you gave me credit for. This isn't possible, Chad whispered, staring at her like she was a ghost, which I supposed she was to him. Very possible, Beverly said. She moved farther into the room and I saw Edward Collins behind her and attorney Jeffrey Matthews. You put something in my tea thinking I wouldn't notice, but I'd been watching you for weeks, Chad, waiting for you to make your move. Chad suddenly lunged forward, trying to break free from the officers. You can't prove anything. It's just his word against mine. Actually, I said, standing up and pulling the Nokia from my pocket, it's your word against your word. I held up the phone. Every confession, recorded. Chad's face went slack with horror, but he recovered quickly, desperation making him reckless. He twisted toward Angela, still standing frozen in the corner. Angela, tell them I was coerced, that he threatened me, that— I already did, Angela said softly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stepped forward, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before: a small wire running from her collar into her sleeve. I've been wearing a wire since yesterday. Angela said, her voice stronger now. Detective Anderson asked me to. After Dad talked to me, I called them, told them everything I knew. Chad's expression transformed from shock to rage to betrayal. You called the police. I called them, Angela said, tears streaming down her face now. Because I won't protect you anymore. Not after what you did to Nicholas. Not after what you tried to do to Mom and Dad. You stupid! Chad tried to lunge at her, but the officers held him firm. Detective Anderson stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. Chad Pierce, you're under arrest for the murder of Nicholas Sterling, attempted murder of Beverly Sterling and Douglas Sterling, embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. As Anderson read, Chad his Miranda rights. Chad thrashed and screamed. You'll never prove I killed Nicholas. His death certificate says suicide. You can't prove anything. Beverly moved to stand beside me, taking my hand. That's where you're wrong, she said calmly. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. Every transaction you made, every gambling debt, every threatening email from Anthony DeLuca, every lie you told, it's all here. She held up the flash drive. And more importantly, Nicholas's private investigator kept copies of everything Nicholas discovered. The real financial records showing you as the embezzler, not him. The timeline proving you visited Nicholas's apartment the night he died. Security footage from your building showing you carrying a wine bottle. Beverly's voice hardened. By tomorrow, the DA will have everything. The world will know Nicholas was a hero who died trying to expose you. His name will be cleared. His reputation restored. No. Chad screamed as the officers dragged him toward the door. No, you can't. Angela, do something. Angela. But Angela turned away, sobbing into her hands. Beverly released my hand and moved to our daughter, pulling her into an embrace. I'm sorry, Angela kept repeating. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have stopped him. I should have protected Nicholas. I should have— Shh, Beverly murmured, stroking Angela's hair. We'll talk. But you did the right thing tonight. You saved your father's life. I watched as they dragged Chad out to the police car, still screaming threats and denials. Detective Anderson approached me, shaking his head. Mr. Sterling, that was incredibly reckless. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, I said. And now you have everything you need, and everything and more. Between the recordings, Angela's testimony, the evidence Mrs. Sterling and Edward Collins compiled, and Dr. Peterson's testimony about the fake death drugs. Anderson smiled grimly. Chad Pierce will spend the rest of his life in prison. As the police cars pulled away, sirens fading into the morning light, I stood on my front porch with Beverly's hand in mine. Alive. Both of us alive. After everything, the grief, the fear, the performance, the danger, we'd won. But as I looked at Angela sitting on the porch steps, her face in her hands, I knew the real work was just beginning. Clearing Nicholas's name publicly. Healing Angela. Rebuilding our family from the ashes Chad had left behind. Beverly squeezed my hand. She was thinking the same thing. My one battle at a time, I said quietly. She leaned her head on my shoulder. One battle at a time. 2 days after Chad's arrest, I sat in a small conference room at the police station. Beverly beside me, Angela across from us with her own attorney. Detective Anderson set up a recording device and slid 3 cups of coffee across the table, a far cry from the stale bread and lukewarm water Chad had given me. "Let's start with the recordings," Anderson said, opening his laptop. "Mr. Sterling, we've analyzed everything from your Nokia phone. Would you like to hear it again?" I nodded, though hearing Chad's confession a second time wouldn't be any easier than the first. Anderson pressed play. Chad's voice filled the small room, tinny through the laptop speakers, but perfectly clear. Nicholas was a self-righteous fool. I added enough sleeping pills to put him down permanently. I made it look like shame. "Your wife got too smart. I put something in her tea." Watched her collapse. I felt Beverly's hand tighten on mine. Across the table, Angela pressed her hands over her mouth, tears flowing silently. When the recording ended, Anderson said, "That alone is enough for conviction." But combined with everything else, he spread documents across the table. I recognized some from Nicholas's journal, others from Beverly's investigation. The forensic accountant's report confirms Chad Pierce embezzled $287,000 from Sterling Manufacturing over 27 months. Anderson continued. The timeline perfectly matches Nicholas Sterling's discovery. "And the gambling debts?" I asked. Anthony DeLuca confirmed Chad owed him $300,000. He's cooperating in exchange for reduced charges on unrelated matters. Anderson pulled out another file. DeLuca's records show Chad made increasingly desperate payments in the weeks before Nicholas's death. Then suddenly a large payment the day after. Beverly leaned forward. "Nicholas's life insurance." "Exactly. Chad had Angela listed as beneficiary on Nicholas's policy through Sterling Manufacturing. $50,000. He forged Angela's signature and cashed it." Angela made a small sound of distress. "I never saw that money, because Chad used it to pay down his debt," Anderson said, "which gave him breathing room until the debt grew again. I thought of the cycle: steal money, gamble it away, steal more, kill to cover it up. Nicholas had died trying to break that cycle. What about Beverly's death?" I forced the word out. "Dr. James Peterson's testimony is documented here." Anderson slid over another file. Dr. Peterson confirmed he helped Mrs. Sterling fake her death using a specialized sedative. He also confirmed that when Mrs. Sterling had her tea tested, after switching it with the sedative, it contained a lethal dose of a substance that would have appeared as natural heart failure. Beverly's voice was steady when she spoke. "I saved a sample. It's in evidence now." "Which brings us to Angela's testimony," Anderson said, looking at my daughter with surprising gentleness. "Ms. Pierce, you're still willing to testify against Chad?" Angela nodded. She'd barely spoken since the arrest. Her attorney, a sharp woman named Elizabeth Carter, spoke for her. "My client will provide full testimony about 1. Nicholas's warning to her days before his death. 2. The text message she saw on Chad's phone. 3. Chad's threats against her if she spoke to authorities. And 4. Her observations of Chad's increasing violence and desperation in the weeks before Douglas Sterling's captivity." The wire recording, Anderson added, captured Chad admitting to drugging Douglas's food. "That's attempted murder charge number 3. I hadn't known until yesterday that the meal had been attempted murder number 3. Beverly's tea was 1. My food was 2. What would have been 3 if Chad hadn't been stopped?" "When will he be formally charged?" Beverly asked. "Arraignment is tomorrow. The DA is pursuing first-degree murder of Nicholas Sterling. 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder for Beverly and Douglas Sterling. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and kidnapping for locking Douglas in his bedroom." Anderson closed his laptop and looked at each of us in turn. "This is one of the strongest cases I've worked in 20 years. With the recorded confession, Angela's testimony, Dr. Peterson's evidence, the financial records, and the physical evidence. He paused. Chad Pierce will spend the rest of his life in prison. I can almost guarantee it. As we left the police station, I noticed Angela lingering behind. When Beverly and I waited for her, she approached slowly. "But what happens to me now?" she asked quietly. "I knew something was wrong for 2 years. I saw that text message. I could have stopped him before he tried to hurt you both." Elizabeth Carter put a hand on Angela's shoulder. "We'll discuss your situation. You're cooperating fully. You ultimately helped stop Chad. The DA is considering those factors, but I saw the question in Angela's eyes. Did she deserve forgiveness? Did she deserve mercy? I didn't have an answer yet, but as we walked to our cars, Beverly whispered to me, "She wore that wire knowing Chad might kill her for it. That took courage." "Or guilt," I replied. "Maybe both," Beverly said. "Maybe both." The question of Angela's fate, legal and familial, still hung in the air. Tomorrow was Chad's arraignment, but I knew that sooner or later Angela would face consequences too. The question was, what would justice for her look like? 3 weeks after Chad's arraignment, Beverly and I stood in the conference room at Sterling Manufacturing headquarters. Media crews set up cameras. Reporters checked their recording equipment. Attorney Jeffrey Matthews reviewed his statement one final time. Through the window, I could see the parking lot filling with people, former colleagues of Nicholas's community members, friends who'd believed the lies. Today, we would tell them the truth. Matthews stepped to the podium, first professional and precise as always. "Thank you all for coming. 2 years ago, Nicholas Sterling passed away under circumstances that shocked this community and devastated his family." The room fell silent except for the clicking of cameras. Nicholas was labeled as an embezzler, a gambler, someone who took his own life from shame over his alleged crimes. Matthews paused, letting the words settle like dust. Today, with the full cooperation of law enforcement and the district attorney's office, we reveal the truth. Nicholas Sterling was a hero. I heard murmurs from the gathered crowd. Beverly squeezed my hand. Matthews continued presenting the evidence methodically. Nicholas discovered Chad Pierce's embezzlement scheme. He confronted Chad, privately giving him a chance to confess and make amends. Instead, Chad murdered Nicholas and framed him for the very crimes Chad had committed. Nicholas Sterling died trying to protect Sterling Manufacturing, its employees, and his family's legacy, Matthews said. He deserves to be remembered not as a criminal, but as a man of integrity who gave his life in pursuit of truth. Then it was my turn to speak. I stepped to the podium, looking out at the faces before me. For a moment, I couldn't find words. Then I thought of Nicholas at 8 years old, bringing me his report card with straight A's. Nicholas at 16, helping me rebuild the engine in my old truck. Nicholas at 25, shaking my hand after his first day at Sterling Manufacturing, saying, "I'll make you proud, Dad." He had. God, he had. My son died trying to do the right thing. I began my voice rougher than I'd intended. He discovered theft. He confronted the thief. He tried to handle it with compassion, giving Chad Pierce every opportunity to choose redemption. I gripped the podium edges. Instead, Chad chose to end Nicholas's life. Then he spent 2 years destroying my son's reputation to cover his own crimes. Every time someone in this community whispered about Nicholas being weak or dishonest or troubled, that was Chad's lie living on. My vision blurred, but I pushed through. I believed those lies too. For 2 years, I thought my son was someone he wasn't. That shame, that guilt is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. But today we reclaim the truth. Today Nicholas gets his name back. Beverly joined me at the podium. Together we'd decided she should speak too. Our son was honest, brave, and loving. Beverly said, her voice stronger than mine had been. He cared deeply about this company and the people who worked here. He spent his final days trying to protect all of you from a predator in your midst. Her voice strengthened further. Today the truth is restored. Nicholas Sterling's name is cleared. His reputation is reclaimed. And we will spend the rest of our lives ensuring he's remembered for who he truly was. The questions came fast after that. Matthews handled most of them, but one reporter asked directly, "Mr. Sterling, how does it feel knowing you spent 2 years believing your son took his own life?" I met the reporter's eyes. It feels like grief compounded by betrayal. I mourned Nicholas. I also mourned who I thought he'd become. Learning the truth didn't bring him back, but it gave me my son's memory back intact. And that matters more than I can express. After the press conference, people approached us individually. Former Sterling manufacturing employees, some crying, some angry, all shocked. An older man stepped forward, Marcus Thompson, who'd worked maintenance alongside Nicholas for years. "I never believed Nick would steal," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He once found $200 in the parking lot and spent 2 hours tracking down who dropped it. That ain't a thief." A younger woman approached hesitantly. "Nicholas helped me understand the benefits paperwork when I had my daughter. He stayed 2 hours after work to explain everything. I should have defended him when people talked. I'm so sorry." One by one, they offered remembrances of the real Nicholas. Kind Nicholas. Patient Nicholas. Honest Nicholas. The son I'd raised finally visible again through the fog of Chad's lies. That evening, Sterling Manufacturing's board of directors issued an official statement. Sterling Manufacturing deeply regrets the false narrative surrounding Nicholas Sterling's death. All records have been corrected to reflect the truth. Nicholas Sterling was the victim of fraud and murder, not the perpetrator. His employment record will reflect his integrity and dedication. A memorial scholarship in his name will be established for employees' children pursuing careers in business ethics. A plaque will be placed in the main office lobby reading, "Nicholas Sterling, integrity above all." Beverly and I sat in the empty conference room after everyone left. Through the window, I could see the spot where they'd soon install Nicholas's plaque. "He would be proud of you," Beverly said quietly. "Of us," I corrected. "We did this together." She laid her head on my shoulder. "There's still Angela's sentencing hearing next month, and Chad's trial. One battle at a time." I reminded her using the words that had become our mantra. But that night driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years, peace about Nicholas. Not complete peace. I'd never stop missing my son, never stop wishing I could have one more conversation with him. But peace knowing the world now knew the truth about who he was. Chad had tried to steal Nicholas's life and his legacy. He'd only succeeded with one. The other, Nicholas's reputation, his honor, his memory as a good man that was restored. And no prison sentence Chad received could ever take that away again. 5 months after Chad's arrest, I sat in a courtroom that smelled of old wood and desperation. Beverly's hand trembled in mine as we watched our daughter stand before Judge Patricia Morrison, a woman whose reputation for fairness was matched only by her intolerance for excuses. Angela wore a gray suit that hung loose on her frame. She'd lost weight during these months of waiting, of knowing that her choices, made under duress or not, would be weighed by the law. Her attorney, Elizabeth Carter, stood beside her with the poised confidence of someone who'd fought these battles before. The gallery was sparse. A few reporters occupied the back rows, their notebooks ready. Detective Anderson sat to our left, his presence both a comfort and a reminder of everything we'd endured. The absence of Chad Pierce was its own testimony. He was awaiting his own trial in a facility where the walls were higher and the futures bleaker. "The court will come to order," Judge Morrison announced, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. The prosecutor, a stern man named Robert Kellerman, rose first. His presentation was clinical, detached. Angela Sterling Pierce stood accused of accessory, after the fact, to homicide and obstruction of justice. The recommended sentence, 3 years in state prison. Your Honor, Kellerman began. While the defendant's cooperation has been noted, we cannot overlook that she lived in the same household where her brother's killer plotted and executed multiple crimes. She had opportunities to come forward. She chose not to. I felt Beverly stiffen beside me. This was the fear we'd carried for months, that Angela's silence born of terror and manipulation would be judged as complicity. Elizabeth Carter stood her bearing calm, but her words sharp. Your Honor, if I may address the court regarding the context of my client's actions. Judge Morrison nodded. Proceed, Ms. Carter. Angela Sterling Pierce is not a criminal, Your Honor. She is a survivor. Carter's voice carried the weight of conviction. The evidence will show that Chad Pierce systematically isolated, threatened, and abused my client over a period of 2 years. She wore long sleeves in summer to hide bruises. She made excuses for black eyes. She lived in constant fear for her life and the lives of her parents. Carter placed a folder on the bench, medical records, photographs, statements from neighbors who'd heard arguments through walls. Nicholas Sterling, Angela's brother, recognized the danger. 3 weeks before his murder, he warned Angela that Chad was capable of anything. She didn't understand the full scope of that warning until it was too late. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. This was the complication in his clean narrative, the murky waters of domestic violence where victims often appeared as collaborators. When Angela discovered the text message on Chad's phone, problem solved. Brother-in-law won't talk now. Make sure old man believes the story. She was paralyzed by fear, Carter continued. Chad told her that if she spoke, he would kill her father, frame her for Nicholas's death, and ensure she never saw daylight again. She believed him, because she'd already seen what he was capable of. Judge Morrison's expression remained neutral, but I saw her eyes flick toward Angela, a woman assessing another woman's pain. Beverly requested permission to speak. The judge granted it. My wife stood slowly, her voice steady, despite the tears threatening to break through. Your Honor, my daughter made mistakes born of fear, not malice. When she finally found the courage to wear that wire to help Detective Anderson, she risked everything. She knew Chad might kill her. She did it anyway. That doesn't excuse her silence, but it should count for something. I rose next, my old soldier's posture returning, despite the months of confinement and starvation. Angela is my daughter, Your Honor. She made choices I wish she hadn't made, but she was trapped by a predator who killed my son and tried to kill my wife and me. When the moment came to stand with justice, she did. And that matters. Angela herself spoke last, her voice barely above a whisper. I failed Nicholas. I should have seen it sooner. I should have been braver. She wiped her eyes, forcing herself to meet the judge's gaze. I can't undo my silence, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure other people don't make my mistakes. I want to help women like me, women who don't know how to escape, who think love means enduring abuse. Judge Morrison leaned back. Her fingers steepled. The courtroom held its breath. Madam Sterling Pierce. The judge began. What happened to you was a profound injustice. Chad Pierce is a manipulative, violent predator, and you were his victim long before you became entangled in his crimes. She paused, letting the words settle. However, the law requires accountability. Your silence allowed a murderer to walk free for years. Your cooperation eventually helped bring him to justice, but it does not erase the harm caused by your inaction. I gripped Beverly's hand tighter. Therefore, Judge Morrison continued, I am sentencing you to 5 years of probation with strict conditions. You will attend therapy twice a week with a licensed trauma specialist. You will complete 500 hours of community service at a domestic violence shelter where you will use your experience to help others recognize and escape abusive relationships. You will have no contact, direct or indirect, with Chad Pierce. Violation of any of these terms will result in a 3-year prison sentence. The gavel struck, and the sound reverberated like a thunderclap. Angela collapsed into Elizabeth Carter's arms, sobbing. Beverly and I stood frozen, processing the mercy and the gravity in equal measure. Probation, not prison. A chance, not an ending. As we left the courtroom, Angela walked between us, not quite reconciled, not quite forgiven, but not quite lost either. She stopped on the courthouse steps, the autumn wind cutting through the thin fabric of her suit. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at both of us. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'll spend every day trying to earn it." Beverly reached out, hesitant, and touched Angela's cheek. "Healing takes time, sweetheart. For all of us." I said nothing. Words felt inadequate. Instead, I thought of Nicholas, of the son who'd tried to save his sister from a monster. I thought of the long road ahead of therapy sessions and community service, and the question that would haunt us all: could a family broken by violence and deceit ever truly mend? Only time would answer. But as we walked down those courthouse steps together, I allowed myself the smallest flicker of hope. Chad Pierce was behind bars awaiting trial for murder. Nicholas's name had been cleared, and Angela, damaged, haunted, but alive, had been given a chance to rebuild. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was a start. 8 months after Angela's sentencing, Beverly and I stood before a newly renovated office building on the east side of town. Morning sunlight gleamed off the brass plaque beside the entrance. The Nicholas Sterling Foundation for Elder Justice. After everything, we'd found a way to honor our son's memory that felt right. Inside the office smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Edward Collins was arranging furniture, desks, filing cabinets, a small conference table. Jeffrey Matthews hung certifications on the wall, his movements precise and deliberate. 2 social workers Beverly had hired were unpacking boxes of case files and reference materials. A volunteer coordinator named Helen Vasquez was setting up a phone system that would become a lifeline for families in crisis. The Foundation's mission was clear: support elderly victims of financial exploitation and abuse, fund investigations into suspected crimes, provide legal assistance to families who couldn't afford it. We'd seen firsthand how predators targeted the vulnerable, how isolation became a weapon, how silence protected the guilty. Nicholas had died trying to expose that darkness. Now we would continue his work. We'd funded the foundation from multiple sources. Beverly's investment portfolio provided the initial capital. The embezzled funds recovered from Sterling Manufacturing, every dollar Chad had stolen, went directly into the foundation's accounts. And donations had poured in from people moved by Nicholas's story, by the injustice of a hero branded a thief. Edward had agreed to serve as chief investigator. His decades of experience as a landlord and observer of human nature made him uniquely suited to spot manipulation and financial abuse. Matthews offered pro bono legal counsel 2 days a week, his expertise in estate law proving invaluable. The social workers, both women who'd worked in elder care advocacy, brought compassion and institutional knowledge. Helen coordinated volunteers and managed the hotline, her bilingual skills ensuring the foundation could serve the city's diverse population. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a surprising crowd. Detective Anderson attended with several officers who'd worked Nicholas's case. Local news cameras captured Beverly's speech, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. Business owners from the neighborhood came to show support. Sterling Manufacturing sent representatives, their presence a quiet acknowledgement of the company's role in Nicholas's vindication. And Angela stood in the back row, silent but present. She wore simple clothes, jeans, and a sweater, and her face bore the marks of someone learning to live with regret. Our eyes met briefly. I nodded. She nodded back. Not forgiveness, not yet. But recognition. My son died trying to expose financial crime and protect those who couldn't protect themselves, Beverly told the assembled crowd. We can't bring him back, but we can honor him by continuing his work, by ensuring that what happened to our family never happens to another. She unveiled a photograph of Nicholas that would hang in the foundation's lobby, a candid shot from his 30s, laughing at something off-camera, his integrity visible in every line of his face. Below it, a bronze plaque read, "Nicholas Sterling. Integrity above all." The applause was respectful, heartfelt. But the real moment came afterward, when a young woman approached us, clutching a folder of documents. "My name is Maria Sanchez," she said, her English accented but clear. "I think my grandfather is in trouble. His caregiver, his own son, is stealing from him. But Abuelo is afraid to report it. He thinks no one will believe an old man with a confused mind." Beverly took her hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "We'll help you, Maria. That's exactly why we're here." Edward stepped forward, already shifting into investigator mode. "Tell me everything you've noticed. Changes in bank statements, unexplained withdrawals, new signatures on documents. Even small details matter." Maria's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As Edward guided her to his office, Matthews joined me by the window. "You've built something good here, Douglas. Nicholas would be proud. He'd probably tell us we're doing it all wrong," I said, managing a small smile. "He was never satisfied with good enough." "Neither are you," Matthews observed. "That's why this will work." By the end of that first day, 3 more families had walked through our doors. 3 more stories of exploitation, isolation, fear. 3 more chances to make Nicholas's death mean something. That evening, as Beverly and I locked up the office, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Angela completed 200 hours of community service at the shelter. She asked if she could volunteer here, help victims of domestic abuse, use her experience to spot manipulation. I leaned against the doorframe, considering. "What do you think?" "I think." Beverly chose her words carefully. "I think maybe. In time. She's still our daughter, Douglas, and she's trying." 14 months after Chad's arrest, Beverly and I drove to Giovanni's restaurant. A neutral location per Angela's suggestion. I parked the car and noticed Beverly's hands trembling slightly in her lap. "We can leave if this becomes too much," I said quietly. "No." Her voice was firm, resolute. "We said we'd try, so let's try." The restaurant was a family-owned Italian place that had survived 3 generations through good food and better hospitality. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, the smell of garlic and tomato sauce. We'd brought Nicholas here for his 30th birthday, back when the world still made sense. Angela arrived exactly on time. She looked different, simpler somehow. No heavy makeup, no expensive clothes that screamed for attention. She wore jeans, a plain blouse, and minimal jewelry. She looked like herself, perhaps for the first time in years. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice unable to hide the anxiety beneath. We exchanged awkward greetings and settled into a booth near the back. The waiter brought menus and water. We made small talk about the weather, the menu options, anything except the elephant sitting at our table. The silences stretched long and uncomfortable. Finally, Angela set down her water glass and looked directly at us. "Hi, I'm not going to pretend this is easy," she began, "or that I deserve your forgiveness. I don't. But I want you to know what I've been doing, not to earn points, but because it's what I need to do." She pulled out her phone and showed us photographs. Angela at the domestic violence shelter, sitting with women whose faces bore the same haunted look she'd once worn. Angela at Nicholas's grave, placing fresh flowers. Angela in a therapy session, tears streaming down her face. "I talked to him," she said softly, referring to Nicholas. "Every Sunday I tell him about the women I've helped, the ones who remind me of who I used to be, trapped, scared, convinced they had no way out." Beverly's hand found mine under the table. "My therapist taught me about something called complex trauma response," Angela continued. It's not an excuse for my choices, but it helps me understand why fear controlled me for so long, why I believed Chad when he said he'd kill you, Dad, if I spoke up, why I convinced myself that silence was the only way to keep everyone safe. Tell us about the shelter, Beverly said, her voice gentle. Angela's face softened. I'm assigned to intake when women first arrive, usually in the middle of the night, with nothing but the clothes they're wearing. I help them fill out paperwork, get them settled. But mostly I listen. There was a woman last week, Carla, her name was. Her husband had convinced her that she was crazy, that no one would believe her if she reported him, that her own family would side with him because he was such a charming guy. Angela's voice cracked. I knew exactly what she was feeling. So I told her my story, not to make it about me, but to show her she wasn't alone. Did it help? I asked. She's still there, still safe. That's all I can ask for. The waiter approached to take our order. We chose dishes without really seeing the menu, our minds elsewhere. When he left, Beverly asked the question I knew had been tormenting her. Do you blame us, Angela, for not seeing what Chad was doing to you? Angela's eyes widened. No. God, no. Chad was a master manipulator. He made sure I never showed weakness around you. He isolated me gradually, so slowly that I didn't even realize it was happening until I was completely cut off. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Beverly's hand. I only blame myself for not trusting you enough to ask for help. He threatened to kill your father, Beverly said, her voice breaking. That's not a failure of trust, sweetheart. That's survival. The dam broke. Angela dissolved into tears, and Beverly slid around the booth to wrap her arms around our daughter. I sat across from them, watching my wife and child cry together, feeling something in my chest loosen, not fully, not yet, but enough. When the tears subsided, we attempted to eat. The food was excellent, but none of us tasted it. Instead, we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Angela told us about her therapy sessions, the PTSD diagnosis, the antidepressants that helped quiet the worst of the panic attacks. Beverly shared how she'd been attending a support group for families of domestic violence survivors, learning that loving someone didn't mean you could save them. Father Nicholas knew, Angela said suddenly. 3 weeks before Chad killed him, Nick pulled me aside at a family dinner. He said Chad was capable of anything, that I needed to be careful. I didn't understand what he meant until it was too late. I thought of my son, of his final act of trying to protect his sister, even as his own life hung in the balance. He loved you, Angela. Right up to the end. I know, she whispered, and I failed him. No, Beverly said firmly. Chad failed him. Chad failed all of us. You were a victim, just like Nicholas. The conversation turned to lighter topics. Angela's plan to enroll in community college, her interest in social work, the small apartment she'd rented with money earned from a part-time job. Normal things, ordinary hopes. As we prepared to leave, Angela hesitated by the car. About the foundation. Would it be okay if I volunteered, not in a public role, just helping behind the scenes, filing, answering phones? Whatever you need. I looked at Beverly. A glance that contained 46 years of marriage, of learning to read each other's hearts. We'll think about it, I said carefully. Not no, not never, just possibility. Angela nodded, understanding what that meant. That's all I'm asking for. A chance. Small steps, Beverly echoed. We didn't hug goodbye. A handshake still felt too formal, too distant. Instead, we simply stood together in the parking lot for a moment, father, mother, daughter, acknowledging the long road ahead. As Beverly and I drove home, she rested her head against the window. It's not forgiveness yet, she said quietly. No, I agreed. But it's something. And for now, that was enough. 2 years after Beverly revealed herself, I stood before Nicholas's grave on a clear October morning. Beverly beside me, Angela a few steps away. The three of us together in silence. The headstone had been replaced. No longer did it bear the false narrative of suicide. Instead, it read, Nicholas Sterling, 1988 to 2023. Hero, seeker of truth, forever loved. Beverly placed white lilies on the grave. Angela whispered, Hi, big brother. I'm trying to become someone you could be proud of. I studied my daughter. Over the past 2 years, I'd watched her transform. She'd become a paid coordinator at the domestic violence shelter and had just been accepted into a graduate program for clinical psychology, specializing in trauma counseling. 18 months sober, finding her way back to us, not completely, perhaps never completely, but enough. We left the cemetery and drove to the Foundation's office. Today marked the 2-year anniversary of its founding. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with purposeful energy. Edward reviewed surveillance footage from a new case. Matthews conferred with a client family. Helen coordinated volunteers while fielding hotline calls. 2 former detectives analyzed financial records. The numbers told our story. 47 families helped in the first year, 83 in the second. We'd recovered $2.3 million in stolen assets. 17 criminal prosecutions. But more than numbers, there were faces. Maria Sanchez's grandfather, now safe. An elderly widow defrauded by a financial advisor. A veteran whose son had stolen his disability benefits. Each case was Nicholas's legacy multiplied. Beverly addressed the staff and volunteers. 2 years ago, we opened these doors with grief and determination. Today, we stand here with hope. Hope that justice is possible, that truth matters, that one person's courage can ripple outward and change lives. She unveiled a wall of photographs showing the families we'd helped. At the center hung Nicholas's portrait, with a framed excerpt from his journal. If I don't make it through this, I hope someone continues the fight. Not for revenge, but for protection. So that what's happening to me and my family never happens to another person. That's what integrity means, standing up even when it costs you everything. The room fell silent. Anderson, now retired, spoke next. I've been a cop for 32 years. I've rarely seen the kind of transformation this family has achieved, turning tragedy into purpose, grief into action. Nicholas would be damn proud. As the reception continued, Angela approached me quietly. Can we talk outside? We stepped into the autumn sunshine. I got my acceptance letter, she said. Clinical psychology program, full scholarship based on my shelter work. That's wonderful, Angela. It's 3 years of intensive study. I'll still volunteer here, but not as much. She met my eyes. I need you to know I'm not running away. I'm running toward something, toward becoming someone who can help others the way I needed help. Your mother and I are proud of you. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't have to say that, Dad. I don't say things I don't mean. You know that about me. She nodded, allowing herself a small smile. Yeah, I do. That evening, Beverly and I returned home, the place where so much horror had unfolded. We'd considered selling, but Beverly insisted we stay, that reclaiming the space was part of healing. She'd repainted every room, replaced furniture, filled the house with light and plants. We prepared dinner together, simple domestic rituals. Chopping vegetables, boiling pasta, debating whether to add garlic to the sauce. These were the real victories, not Chad's life sentence, not the public vindication. But the ability to laugh in our kitchen, to plan next week's grocery trip, to live ordinary lives after extraordinary trauma. The phone rang. Angela, her voice bright. I forgot to tell you, I also got accepted into the University of Michigan's program. Their trauma specialization is supposed to be the best in the country. Beverly's eyes filled with tears. When she hung up, she looked at me with pure, uncomplicated joy. Our daughter is coming back, Douglas. She never really left, I said. She just got lost for a while. We ate dinner on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and orange. Tomorrow we'd return to Nicholas's work. More families to help, more predators to expose. But tonight, we simply sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who'd survived a war in our own home against an enemy who'd worn the mask of family. "You know what I'm thinking about?" Beverly asked, her hand finding mine. "What's that?" "That phone call from Edward, 2 years ago. If you hadn't answered, if you hadn't trusted him." "But I did," I said simply. "I answered. I investigated. I survived." "We survived," Beverly corrected. "Together." I thought of Nicholas, of the son who died protecting truth, of Angela who'd found her way back from darkness, of the families we'd helped, of Beverly who'd risked everything for justice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight we were Douglas and Beverly Sterling, alive, together, at peace. In the fading light, Beverly's profile remained beautiful, fierce. She caught me looking and smiled. "What are you thinking, old soldier?" "That we did it," I said. "We survived the worst thing that can happen to a family, and we came out the other side. Not unscathed, not unchanged, but together." "And that's enough." I squeezed her hand. "That's everything." The sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere Chad Pierce sat in a prison cell. Somewhere Angela was planning her future. And somewhere Nicholas was at peace, his name cleared. His courage recognized, his legacy alive in every family we helped. Tomorrow the work would continue. But tonight we were home, and that was enough. If you've stayed with me until now, you've heard more than just another family story. You've witnessed what happens when evil wears a familiar face and justice demands everything you have left. My name is Douglas Sterling. I'm 74 years old now, and God has walked beside me through valleys I never imagined I'd survive. When I was locked in that bedroom, starving and desperate, I prayed. When Beverly revealed herself alive, I thanked God. And when Angela finally broke free from Chad's control, I knew God's mercy was real even when his timing tests our faith. Looking back at this family story, I see my failures clearly. I was blind to Chad's manipulation. I dismissed the warning signs. I let my desire for family harmony override my instincts. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the red flags because confrontation feels uncomfortable. Don't assume that someone who married into your family automatically deserves unconditional trust. Don't wait for tragedy to force your eyes open. People call what I did dad revenge, and maybe they're right. But here's the truth. My dad revenge wasn't born from hatred. It was born from love. Love for Nicholas, whose name had been destroyed. Love for Beverly, who risked everything. Even love for Angela, who needed saving from herself. True dad revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about making sure the truth survives, even when the victim doesn't. God gave me the strength to endure those 3 days of captivity. He gave Beverly the courage to stage her own death. He gave Angela the final push she needed to wear that wire and choose justice over fear. I won't pretend I understand why Nicholas had to die for this story to unfold, but I trust that his sacrifice meant something eternal. Here's what I want you to take from this family story. Protect the vulnerable in your life, but do it with open eyes. Financial elder abuse destroys thousands of families every year. Domestic violence thrives in silence. Manipulation hides behind charm and family ties. If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. Investigate. Ask hard questions. Seek help before it's too late. The Nicholas Sterling Foundation exists because I refused to let my son's death be meaningless. We've helped over 100 families, recovered millions in stolen assets, and put predators behind bars. But every victory reminds me we can't bring back the dead. We can only honor them by protecting the living. Your voice matters. If this story resonated with you, if you've faced betrayal, manipulation, or injustice in your own family, share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the lifeline someone else desperately needs. If this video moved you, please share it with friends and family who need to hear it. And subscribe to this channel for more stories of survival justice and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Thank you for walking this difficult journey with me. Your time honors Nicholas's legacy. A final word of transparency. The stories on this channel blend real experiences with fictionalized elements designed for educational impact. If dramatized content isn't your preference, I respect that. Feel free to explore other videos. But if you choose to stay, know that every story here carries a lesson worth learning. May God bless you and keep you safe.